Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the state budget, or lack thereof, Kathleen Kane, medical marijuana, and then my special guest this week, brought on by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, is Robin Wiessmann. She's the Secretary of Banking. We'll get back to that in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, well, we have an action-packed show, as they say, complete with a variety of important topics. So let me start out. We have Brad Bumsted from the Pittsburgh Tribune-Tribune and Pete Muntean. He's the Capital reporter for WGAL-TV. All right, we got to start. I don't even know where to start with all the news that you folks you have been writing about. So let's start with the budget. Let's go to what is now going on. Bring us up to date. They're meeting what?
Well, they're coming to a head, and they're meeting over this weekend. Remember, this is the second longest budget stalemate ever in the history of the state. And so right now, things seem to be getting closer to being resolved as this goes into its fifth month. Lawmakers working over the weekend, trying to get this done and a deal onto the governor's desk. There seemed to be some progress right before Thanksgiving, the so-called Thanksgiving framework that would have raised the sales tax to the second highest in the nation. Now it seems that the deal will expand the sales tax instead of raising the rate. And lawmakers now trying to push that onto the governor's desk, Senate and House working through the weekend.
Pete wisely used the word seems, because when it comes to raising revenue like this and extending the sales tax, there's still a lot of dissension among Republicans, particularly House Republicans, to do that. On the other hand, everybody now seems to want a deal. It seems like they're down to it. They're in lockdown mode, I think, this week. So there's a chance. I ran into Jake Corman last week, the Senate Majority Leader
in the Senate,
who said, look, we're 90% there. We have the 10% to do, and that'll be the bumpiest ride.
Yeah.
So, and it will be. It won't be easy. So this has the potential to blow up and continue.
But as they say, the devil's always in the details. When they get down, as Pete talked about, once you start, they need to come up with some money. They want to spend in the framework 6% more than this year, right?
Right, and for schools, 6% more.
And 6% for schools. So they just can't use what they call recurring revenues. No. They need new revenues. But as you point out, if they start getting into removing exemptions, you're going to get the tourist industry. You're going to get the business community.
You already have those groups lobbying.
That's what I mean.
They're already lined up. But the real scuttlebutt has been lawmakers, to this point, haven't seen much in the way of details. There's something like 30 or 40 bills that lawmakers are going to have to pass between the House and the Senate, back and forth, and then onto the governor's desk in order to get a deal done.
Now, the state is actually spending money.
They are. It's a footnote to this, but a very, very interesting one, and that is that Representative Seth Grove, who's from Spring Grove, had a study this week that showed that $30.4 billion in state and federal money has been spent over the past 5 months while we've been in this budget impasse. And, you know, while certain human service providers weren't getting money, there were things like, he mentioned a $140,000 study of domestic animals by Pima. Well, I don't doubt that that's important maybe to evacuate animals somehow, someday, but there were drug and alcohol providers, rape crisis centers for a long while going without funding.
Yeah, and this, I mean, it seems like, and you know, I'm not saying this in a joking fashion, but next weekend is Pennsylvania Society weekend, and lawmakers typically go there. And now there's this, you're hearing cancellations or lawmakers that normally would go not going to be there because I guess the optics, and I guess because they think it just sets the wrong tone, right? Well,
they go party in New York, essentially, and granted, there's some official business that sort of goes down, but primarily it's a lot of pomp and circumstance. And it doesn't look good when there's no budget, lawmakers going out of town, essentially celebrating the work that they've done at the end of the year.
Terry, you mentioned optics, and that's the key word. All it takes is a photograph of somebody eating shrimp and champagne while there really is no budget in place after 6 months. Now, maybe there's an agreement and they're still working on it, but it won't be good unless there's a budget pretty well on its way to passage.
Yeah, I think. All right, let's run to a break. When we come back, we have so much news about Kathleen Kane this week and the appointment of a special prosecutor and the ramifications of that. It just grows and grows, as they say, exponentially. And we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, Brad Bumsted and Pete Muntean joined me, the journalists this week. They've been covering lots of these big stories in Harrisburg and elsewhere. And one of the big stories took place not in Harrisburg, but in a city of brotherly love this week, right?
At the National Constitution Center.
There you go.
And some people were saying there was porn displayed at the National Constitution Center. What I saw displayed there, only one photo was really questionable in that regard. A lot of it was inappropriate emails that were put up on the screen. But the event was held by Attorney General Kathleen Kane to announce the appointment of Doug Gansler as she had billed it previously as a special prosecutor to investigate porn. Well, first of all, the Attorney General can't appoint a special prosecutor without court permission, so he's not really, and technically he is a special deputy.
Special deputy,
Right.
Okay.
And he will be paid per diem at the same salary that Kathleen Kane makes of approximately $158,000 a year. And they have the money for that now, but it could cost up to $2 million for this total investigation. And Chuck Ardo, Kane's spokesman, said the next day that, well, they don't really have that. It's in this budget, but they'll have to make some tough decisions, meaning there might have to be other cuts to come up with this money.
Yeah.
Aside from a few details, we kind of knew that this was coming. I mean, you have to look back to the day before Thanksgiving when the Senate recommended that it start its removal process of Kathleen Kane in front of the full Senate. So we knew that her office...
She said, I mean, she is on the record that she was obviously holding thousands of these emails. She selectively released them over the course of her tenure as Attorney General. She has said, I'm taking people down with me. And is the juxtaposition of that obvious to everybody?
Well, the day that this originally popped in the Senate, she said, I'm going to hold a press conference on Tuesday, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Right. She held it, and now Doug Gansler says he's going to go through tens of thousands, if not millions of emails, and there's going to be an incredible, you could call it a witch hunt in the state government.
Now, he has subpoena power, which means if this holds true, he could go into any department in state government, get any server in any county government, any public server anywhere, issue a subpoena. Are governments just going to turn?
I don't know about that. I'm not an attorney, but I think a judge has to approve a subpoena, and I think there has to be some basis for getting that subpoena.
Well, how about an email?
Like possibly a crime occurred, okay? You know, maybe he can. I don't really know the answer to that, but it's one of the many unanswered questions about his powers. He says he could use a grand jury. Well, will he really be able to use a grand jury? Will a grand jury judge allow him to come in and do that? The guy at this point, while great credentials on paper, doesn't have a Pennsylvania law license. Yeah. So he can't go before a judge for a Pennsylvania grand jury. Now, he'll get reciprocity or some way to,
he'll find a way to do it.
Yeah, that'll be solved. But in the meantime, there are a lot of questions, not only about the funding, about what his powers are, how it'll work. And maybe it'll work smoothly. I don't know. But
so, in other words, this is a process where they're going to look at the pornographic emails if it all works out, to try to find out, he said, if any laws were broken. He specifically cited a bunch of possible laws that could be violated as a result of exchanging these pornographic, racist, and sexist emails, to see where that all leads. But doesn't that leave open a whole series of other questions about his particular role?
It does.
And where does all that leave us?
Yeah, I mean, this potentially could go into areas like the emails of the Wolf administration and what other issues would they come across there, and how broad are his powers really going to be. The other aspect of this, too, is that if Kane is removed by the Senate and there's a new interim attorney general, that person could say, we're not doing this investigation.
All right, let's revert to that. The Senate, a special committee of the Senate has said that that they can move ahead, the Senate could move ahead and hold a hearing in order to determine whether Kane could be removed because she doesn't have a law license. Now, the governor has a role in that that's been a little confusing this week in the news reports. Explain that.
Well, this is all laid out in a sort of obscure piece of the state constitution, Article 6. Section 7. And in that, it says that the Senate can remove Kane from office, the governor can remove Kane from office after the Senate does its process, its removal process, if there is what's called reasonable cause. Reasonable cause. Yeah. And so yesterday on Smart Talk on WITF, the governor said that he would essentially be beholden to the Senate's process and go through, do their bidding, I think was the direct quote. Right. Then a few hours later, the governor was asked the same thing in an unrelated press conference and said, well, I think that was a poor choice of words, and so we're waiting to see what the governor actually did.
He walked it back a little bit and said that he's still wrestling with it, but it seems hard. He has called for her to resign. But I think he does have qualms about the process, and because it's never been done before with an elected row officer that we are aware of. There was one attempt in the late 1800s.
Yeah, the person wasn't removed. The two individuals weren't removed because the Senate didn't go along with it, and we don't have a lot of precedents. I mean, I think that's both of you are making that. We're in a sense with one instance in uncharted territory, right?
That's exactly right. So, look, I think there are senators who have qualms about the way they're proceeding here. On the other hand, some would perceive her behavior as detrimental to law enforcement in this state, that there have been numerous examples were brought up about challenges that will be raised by defense attorneys. It's already happened in Allegheny County, where a defense lawyer is saying because she doesn't have a law license, the charges should be dismissed against a defendant. And Bruce Beamer, the first assistant, testified and said, look, the nuclear scenario we see is a violent criminal is released by a judge based on an argument made by a defense attorney that she doesn't have a law license.
We're out of time. Pete, we were going to get to medical marijuana. We'll see if it goes anywhere. We'll have you back, and we'll see. It's been
no
real
movement right now anyway. It's
good. All right, thank you. All right, coming up, we're going to have our popular financial literacy update. We're going to get into what you should do over the holidays. The Secretary of Banking and Securities, Robin Wiessmann, is going to join me, along with Pat Conway. He's the president of Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. We'll tell you all you need to know to protect yourself over this holiday season.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, welcome back to the program. We're into the holiday season. You are besieged with promotions and sale items to borrow money, to buy products online, to go in and shop in stores. Joining me, as often is the case, is Pat Conway. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Robin Wiessmann. She's the Pennsylvania Secretary of Banking and Securities. You were also state treasurer. You were on our program many times when you were treasurer, right?
It was a pleasure, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we're delighted to have you back. All right, Patrick, let me start with you. Here's what I read. More and more people shopping online, not going into stores. Am I right or wrong about that?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
let's talk about the dangers in that. It's just we want people to be protected when they get online.
Well, using credit cards and shopping online is very safe. You just have to be cautious. You have to be thoughtful. It's a convenient way to shop. We expect consumers to spend more this holiday season than last year because generally they're in a better financial position. And more purchases are bought online, and I think that being careful and being thoughtful with your credit card and using passwords and things of that nature is going to be really important.
Yeah. Now, given what you do in the department, are there steps that people should take, or are there activities that your department engages in to provide consumers with protections?
Absolutely. We have a hotline. I think the most significant item I could tell you today is that we have a hotline, 1-800-PA-BANKS, which not only serves as our consumer hotline, but also serves as information, a conduit to information about brokers, banks, etc. So we are very, very engaged in providing those services. However, we also are delivering a lot of information on specific steps. And as it relates to the shopping online this year, I think it's really important that people take some significant steps to safeguard themselves and their bank accounts.
Yeah.
One of the things to point out is that when you are shopping online, that you should not use the same passwords for shopping as you do for your bank account. You really need to differentiate that.
That is very important. I think a lot of us fall guilty of using the same passwords because there's so many. You can't log on to anything and get into, you can't even get newspaper or magazines or on websites without, and how many of the, I know there are apps for that and you can use these apps. So what are the things in it? Do you think, Patrick, that the main problem is because people are reasonably protected, from the total loss that leads to?
I think so. I think
some of it, right? Anyway, yeah.
Consumers generally know that the liability is with the financial institution, and using credit and debit cards to shop, particularly in the holiday time, this busy time of the year, is safe. It's convenient and safe.
Yeah.
So I think consumers may, sort of get lulled into that thinking, but it's convenient to use the same password, for example, because it's easy for consumers. But taking that extra step to protect yourself, particularly in this era of cybersecurity problems, is really important, especially during the holiday season. The Governor Wolf has a Consumer Financial Protection Initiative. I know that you want to talk a little bit about, say more about that. Get into what the details of that are so our viewers have a sense about it.
Certainly. It's a high priority for the governor. It's a high priority for my department. Protecting and informing the consumer is a very significant part of our mission. And the governor recently announced an initiative that he articulated 4 elements in it. One of the most important ones is preventing elder financial abuse. And we are working with the Department of Aging on that, again, to inform and protect and also make sure the people that elders are dealing with are informed and can protect. The second element is the element of making sure people are preparing for savings. In the holiday season, as you can imagine,
we spend.
Yes, and if there's one thing to advise families, the best gift you can give your family is financial stability. All
right, we're going to run to a break. We're going to pursue a little bit of that because I think that's something we all ought to be very mindful of, particularly as we get older. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Or the
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers with Robin Wiessmann. She's the Secretary of Banking and Securities, and Patrick Conway, he heads the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. All right, we were in the midst of talking about this consumer financial protection initiatives, but there is a major distinction to be drawn as people go in and they put a credit card down and they say debit or credit. I get that all the time, debit or credit. What should people be wary of?
I think they should be wary of the fact that credit cards are different than debit cards. Debit cards, even if you have a prepaid amount on it, can be directly linked to your savings. So if someone comes in and hacks your debit card, it could have far-ranging, much more damaging consequences. A credit card is limited in terms of the responsibility of the credit card company.
Yeah, and you're doing anything different to protect the consumer on this?
Well, I think, the important thing that credit unions and banks like to remind consumers is, using debit and credit cards is very safe. It's convenient, it's very safe. The responsibility, if there is an issue, is with the financial institution, and now it's shifting to the merchant as well. That shift occurred in October, but from the consumer standpoint, be careful and thoughtful, but don't be afraid to use credit and debit cards. It's obviously very convenient and very safe.
Yeah. One of the things in your Consumer Financial Protection Initiative has to do with lenders that, from out-of-state companies. I'm not, obviously we want as many folks in our state to buy in our state for obvious reasons, but they don't always do that, and there's a concern about, just be a little cautious. What's that concern?
Well, there is always the lure of hassle-free loans from a lot of lenders. It's an open market, and people will always try and lend you money, even if it's at usurious rates, even if it's very high rates. And it's a very, very big industry in the country, and it's really damaging to a lot of consumers who end up paying multiples of interest relative to the actual amount of the loan. The typical, one of the great examples is auto car title lending, where a typical loan of $950 can get recycled 8 times.
I know where you're going to head with
thousands
this.
of dollars. Yeah. And then if you don't pay up, remember, these lenders care about collecting.
Yeah.
They don't care about the consumer's ability to repay it.
Right.
So if you don't pay up, they get your car.
All right, we're just about out of time. Can I give you an assignment?
Absolutely.
Next month when you come in, let's talk about a plan, moving forward as we get into 2016. Obviously, we got the presidential election that some of us will be consumed with. But can you come in and talk about a monthly budget and a written statement and how to do that planning? I think that, what do you think? That would be a great idea.
Absolutely. Right after the holidays, planning, budgeting for 2016.
Absolutely.
Important stuff.
All right, thanks for coming in. It's great seeing you again, Secretary.
Pleasure.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.